Michigan during the 1800s looked and operated quite differently than the Michigan we know today. Tools were merely an extension of a man's hand, whereas today's tools are designed to get a job done quickly. In order to get a better understanding of how early Michiganians used tools, we will look at the advancement of Michigan farming tools, from early subsistence farming to highly intensive commercial farming. Michigan farming techniques have progressed from man-powered cradle scythes to horse-powered walking cultivators to engine-powered tractors. In addition to describing how these items were used, we will discuss why these items were useful in terms of the century in which they were used. Farming tools today look different than the tools developed by Michigan's early craftsmen, and there are many factors that account for these differences.
In the early 1800s, Michigan settlers were almost exclusively subsistence farming. They worked continuously to maintain their farms and produce the basics necessary for survival. In Michigan, wheat had proven itself an important and sustainable crop. One of the tools useful in the farming of wheat was the cradle scythe. It does a similar job as the sickle, harvesting grain, but the cradle holds the cut grains rather than allowing them to fall to the ground for later gathering. The cradle scythe consists of a curved blade with wooden prongs to catch the falling wheat. Though this was a modern and useful tool in the early to mid-1800s, it was still operated by the power of man alone. A farmer was limited by the amount of work he could complete by hand each day. This made having excess crops unrealistic, and farmers were only able to produce what they consumed at home. It wasn't until a new technology, one that was powered by something other than man, that farmers were able to produce more crops.
Before there were cultivators, handheld hoes were used in farming to break up the soil. This strenuous method was improved in the 1850s when the first horse-drawn cultivator was created. The one-horse cultivator consisted of as many as 5 teeth to comb the soil. Farmers walked behind and guided the horse-drawn walking cultivator. It loosened the soil and destroyed the weeds around the growing plants. The Civil War labor shortage hastened the adoption of labor-saving and mechanized farm equipment. And like all successful business people, farmers welcomed new ways to produce more products with less effort. Thus, between 1850 and 1920, mechanization and scientific agricultural methods increased farm production. This new development led to an expansion in the agriculture industry. One factor that played a prominent role in the expansion of cultivators was the concept of planting seeds by row rather than randomly scattering them. This made it easier to dig out grown vegetables, and the cultivator became a very efficient tool for doing this accurately and quickly. And as you will see, doing things accurately and quickly became and still continues to be the main goal behind agriculture.
Farmers began to switch from horse-powered to engine-powered tools to cultivate their land at the start of the 20th century. Previously, a farmer would need to have upwards of 20 horses to farm a field. Farmers had to spend their resources feeding, housing, and working the fields with these horses. At this time, working the land was expensive and inefficient. Before the invention of the tractor, Michigan farms produced a wide array of crops and livestock. The introduction of new farming tools, such as the tractor, made a significant and lasting impact on how farms were ran. By the 20th century, Michigan farmers were using tractors as opposed to horse-drawn cultivators, which significantly cut farming costs and made work more efficient. Not only was farming easier and cheaper, farms became much more specialized. By 1930, almost half of Michigan's farms were only growing general or specialty crops. Technological advances at this time ushered Michigan into a new era of agriculture that defines how the industry is ran today.
We have followed the advancements of Michigan farming tools from early subsistence farming to modern-day mass production. During the 1800s, Michigan looked and operated quite differently than the Michigan we know today. Michigan farming techniques have progressed from man-powered cradle scythes to horse-powered walking cultivators to engine-powered tractors. In the early 1800s, Michigan settlers were almost exclusively subsistence farming. The cradle scythe was a modern and useful tool in the early to mid-1800s, but it was still operated by the power of man alone, and a farmer was limited by the amount of work he could complete by hand each day. In the 1850s, the first horse-drawn cultivator was created. Between 1850 and 1920, mechanization and scientific agricultural methods increased farm production. By the 20th century, Michigan farmers were using tractors as opposed to horse-drawn cultivators, which significantly cut farming costs and made work more efficient. These fast-paced technological advancements made Michigan the agricultural giant it is today. However, this technology would mean nothing without the committed farmers driving it.